This is a recording at the Kansas City Secular AA Speaker Meeting held every Saturday night at 7 o'clock p.m. at HJ's Youth and Community Center, 6425 Wornall Road, Kansas City, Missouri. This is episode 11, and our speaker is Jack B.
All right, welcome to the Secular Speaker Meeting. I'm Simon, and I'm an alcoholic.
Simon.
I've asked Richard to read the preamble.
Hi, I'm Richard, and I'm an alcoholic. AA is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover. We have no dues or fees for membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help others to achieve sobriety.
Our secular group attempts to maintain a tradition of free expression and to conduct a meeting where all may feel free to express any doubts or disbeliefs that they may have, and to share their own personal form of spiritual experience, their search for it, or the rejection of it. In keeping with AA tradition, we do not endorse or oppose any form of religion or atheism. Our only wish is to help those who want recovery without having to accept anyone else's beliefs or having to deny their own. During the meeting, we'll pass around the basket if you'd like to contribute to coffee and rent and other expenses. It's always appreciated, but not necessary. Is there anybody? No, new. We recognize extended periods of sobriety. Is there anyone celebrating any number of days or more days of sobriety? Meeting will begin with a 30-minute speaker, and then we'll pass around the mic afterwards, and you can respond to things that you've heard or talk about anything that you'd like. It's not really anything else we need to go over. We do record the meeting and publish it to our website, secularaaspeaker.org, so if there's anything that you decide that you don't want to contribute to the podcast, but you do want to contribute to the meeting, you can let us know afterwards, or there's an off button on the microphone, or you can set down the mic, or whatever you feel comfortable doing. Tonight's speaker is Jack. Take it away.
Okay, I'm Jack. I'm an alcoholic. First thing I'm going to do is just read a couple of sentences from the 12 Secular Steps book by Bill W. It's an addiction recovery guide, and I love this. It says, addiction has a complex pathology, and I admire the holistic and very effective approach provided by the 12-step program. I think that if anybody hasn't read that book, please get it. It's a really great book. Well, I'm going to talk for a little bit, basically, about where I came from, some of my addiction issues, etc. To start off with, I was born in late September 1946. I was part of the post-war baby boom. All the GIs coming back from the war. And I grew up in Massachusetts. And unlike an awful lot of the people that we've had in the meetings that have talked about the difficult childhood that they had, basically with parents or other problems with siblings and so on and so forth, I had a very idyllic childhood. I grew up across the street from my grandfather's dairy. They had cows and horses, and always had a great hayloft to play in where they always had a bunch of cats and so on and so forth. And neither of my parents drank, period. They never beat me. They never gave me any kind of trouble. So, I didn't have a lot of issues that I had to overcome. Okay. So what that really means is that my alcoholism is totally mine because I didn't have any reason to go there. Now, my dad's family had a lot of alcoholism within the family. He didn't drink, but his brothers did. His dad did. His dad had a brother that died an alcoholic. So I knew from an early age that I had some kind of propensity for problems with alcohol. But anyway, I grew up there, and, as typical of kids, we played in the woods, played in the ponds, always made rafts that never made it all the way across the pond. I don't think I ever made it across the pond. Of course, the pond was only about a foot deep, so it really wasn't much of a problem. But we rode bicycles. We'd leave in the morning and we'd come back for dinner. And your parents never worried about you. They didn't worry about where you were, what you were getting into as far as trouble. And it really was a great childhood. So I've got to say that was never a problem for me. Now, eventually, we moved out of Massachusetts. We moved up to Buffalo, New York. We were there about 16 months and then moved down to Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, I did the second half of ninth grade and then all the way through high school. And it was a interesting area to have moved into. An awful lot of the people that lived there at the time worked for General Electric in the space program. So it was a fairly well-to-do area that we moved into. We certainly weren't well-to-do, but there were a lot of kids there that were. And what really kind of surprises me is that there really wasn't a lot of drinking that went on in high school, at least not with the people that I socialized with. There was no such thing. Drugs existed, but nobody dealt with that at the time. And I think it was probably about the tail end of my junior or the beginning of my senior year, I went off with a bunch of the guys for a little camp out, and they brought some beer with them. And that was the first time I had ever had any kind of alcohol. And I remember sipping the beer, thinking to myself, who in the hell would drink this? It was crap. And I didn't have enough to start getting high off it, so I didn't understand why you would drink that shit. And it's really kind of surprising because I still love the smell of beer. It kind of smells like bread to me, and it's really wonderful. But I never have liked the taste of it, although I've got to admit that it certainly in the beginning took me where I wanted to go. Well, after high school, I went off to college. In the first semester that I was there, I drank some, but very little. And the main reason for that was, even at that time, I was afraid of becoming an alcoholic. I'm not sure why, but I just had a feeling that I didn't want to be there. Okay. Second semester, I pledged a fraternity and ended up joining the fraternity. Well, naturally, with fraternities, drinking goes up. And what I will admit is that there was never pressure within the fraternity to drink. Nobody sat there and said, you have to have 6 beers or 12 beers or whatever. Once again, it was just purely me. And so I can't blame it on anybody. I will admit that my junior year, I really didn't drink a whole heck of a lot. My junior year, I worked really, really hard on my artwork. And I was an art major, by the way. And of course, I didn't get the kind of grades that I wanted to get. And I was really frustrated by that. So my senior year, I drank a lot. Showed up to class drunk, didn't show up at all sometimes. And I ended up on the dean's list. I'm not sure how the hell that happened. And my parents came up for my graduation, and I was the first in my family ever to graduate from college. Unfortunately, the night or a couple of nights before graduation, I found some guys that were stealing our cigarette machine. So I jumped 5 of them, which probably wasn't the best idea. And I was well lubricated at the time, and my hair was a lot longer, and I definitely looked like a crazy man. So when my parents showed up for graduation, I had a fat lip and a black eye. And I'm sure that they were absolutely proud that this is what they had paid for college for. But I think one of the things that's kind of interesting to me is that in college and when I was in the Navy later on, I can't tell you the number of guys who would be sitting there talking about their drinking and telling you about how many dumb shit things they did while they were drunk. And of course, everybody tried to top the last guy. Oh, I did something even dumber than you. And on and on and on it went. And it's like, we never happened to think there may be a problem developing here, okay? And for me, I did start seeing that the amount of alcohol I drank and the number of problems I had were both going up at about the same rate. Early on, you can kind of think to yourself, oh, it's just chance. Well, it may be just chance, but it's chance based on the fact that you were full of alcohol and doing stuff that you wouldn't normally have done. So I finished my college career and enlisted in the Navy. I enlisted in the Navy about 2 months before I graduated. I was going to graduate in 68, and 68 was one of the big years for Vietnam. And I decided that if I didn't enlist in the Navy, I was going to get drafted. So I enlisted before graduation, and sure enough, about 2 weeks after graduation, I got the little induction notice from the Army, which I was more than happy to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't go. I'm already in the Navy. Yeah, it really was. Sort of. Okay, I'll get more into that later. But my first duty station was Pensacola, Florida. And we had a helicopter training base down there where we trained all the Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard helicopter pilots. And these are all people that were going to be heading to Vietnam shortly. In fact, most of the helicopters that they trained in were choppers that had come back from Vietnam that had been shot full of holes, and they fixed them back up and put new electronics in them and gave them to young students. I didn't think that was a really good idea to give a new student a chopper that had been shot down, but apparently it worked. So anyway, I spent about 2 years in Pensacola, and drinking, of course, went up at the same time. And I met a girl. We dated for a while. She got pregnant. She left. And she ended up having a baby in May 22nd of 1970. Okay? And she was out of town, so I never met the baby. Well, in 1971, I got shipped over to Vietnam. And in my thinking, I would have been on a ship. But no, they put me at an advanced tactical support base, which was 28 miles west of Saigon and about 7 miles below the Parrot's Peak, which is in Cambodia. We ran river patrol boats, and I was with the Naval Advisory Group. Part of my responsibility was trying to teach the Vietnamese how to use our supply system, which was kind of a joke because virtually nobody knew how to use our supply system. It was really complex and very screwed up. But they also put me in charge of the club, the enlisted club. Kind of like putting a fox in the hen house. You know, he had plenty of beer and all the rest of this stuff. And I've got to admit that the alcohol that I drank while I was there numbed my emotions. And one of the things that I tried desperately hard to do when I went to Vietnam was to numb my emotions. Part of the reason for that was that I don't like blood. Not only do I not like blood, I don't like body parts that are inside that end up being on the outside. That's not a good idea. And that would happen fairly regular in the environment that we were in. So by numbing myself and really getting rid of my emotions, I felt that I would be able to handle any kind of a crisis that came up. And one of my fears was definitely that if somebody I knew and liked was injured, if I was passing out, throwing up, or whatever, I wouldn't be able to help them. And that bothered me more than the thought of getting killed. And actually, I never expected to come back from Vietnam anyway. I really felt that was going to be the end of the party. Probably the closest I ever came to getting killed over there, I went on a boat trip with 2 Vietnamese boat crews. We had an 80,000-gallon fuel barge between us. And so we couldn't go the normal route, the short route to the base. We had to go all the way down into the Delta, turn around in the Delta, and then head back up to the base. Well, the Vietnamese crews knew that I had a pallet of beer and a pallet of soda on the boat that was going up to the base. And this, for them, would have been like Fort Knox. So when we stopped at a little river town, they told me to go into the river town and just kind of sightsee. Well, I also knew that it was about half Viet Cong, so I wasn't about to do that. But I met up with some Philippine tugboat crew who wanted me to drink with them. And it was like, yeah, okay, that's not a problem. So I started drinking with them. Then the Vietnamese got kind of hacked off because I was drinking with the Filipinos. So they went out and got me and brought me back to the boat. And they have a little game where each one of them has a drink and you have a drink with them. Okay. And it goes all the way around this little circle. And they drink what they call basade, which is rice whiskey. And when they bring it onto the boat, it comes in a little plastic bag, a little baggie. It looks almost like it should have a goldfish floating in it, And it was nasty stuff, but it was really, really strong. Well, naturally, I got totally wiped and I passed out. Then they had the bright idea of throwing me overboard. So they carried me out and they threw me overboard. Well, when I hit the water, I woke up, but it's completely black and you have no idea what's up, what's down. And I remembered that I had read an article one time in Reader's Digest, believe it or not, Reader's Digest, that ever said, if you get in the water and it's dark and you can't tell which way is up, do not start to swim. Tuck yourself together and the buoyancy will take you in the direction you want to go. So I did that and I spun around because I had actually was face down, heading down towards the bottom of the river. And I broke the water just about the time I ran out of air. How I had enough air to do that, I'll never even know. But I broke the surface of the water and they took off like crazy. Because I wasn't supposed to come back up. So that to me is probably about the closest I ever came. And when I get back to the States, I reapplied to Hallmark, which is where I had applied before I went into the Navy. And I came down here and I started work in 1972. In the very beginning, I was able to really modify my alcohol content or take to the point where I would only have 1 beer a night. And I would come home and I would sit on the back porch and I would have a beer and I would read. Or I would write cards because I was a writer at the time. Shortly thereafter, I got married and alcohol content started going up. And it wasn't long before Jill, my wife, Jack and Jill, that always was a great one. She left. And I'm not really sure how much the alcohol had to do with it, owing to the fact that I was number 2 out of 5. So I think there was an attention deficit disorder that she had, that it wouldn't have made a difference if I was drinking or not. But she left, and I started a business in the flea market in Westport with a friend of mine, and we both liked beer. And so we would drink a lot of beer, refinish a lot of furniture, hit a lot of auctions. And I've got to admit that St. Joe is a 2-beer drive from Kansas City. And we used to go up there every Friday night for auctions and so on and so forth. Still, I've got to admit that the drinking was a problem, but it wasn't out of control. I never missed a day at work and so on and so forth. I eventually bought a house, moved over into the Brookside area. In 1977, I decided to quit smoking. And quitting smoking was a lot harder than quitting drinking. And the thing that was interesting about quitting smoking is without something that you're doing with your hands, you're going to fill it with something else. And that ended up being booze. So once again, the alcohol content went up a lot when I quit smoking. I met my wife, Lynn, and we got married in 1980. Our son Wesley was born in 81, and our daughter Lauren was born in 83. Again, the drinking still became a problem, and in 86, my wife decided to pull an intervention. I came home from work one day and went in the house, and there were a bunch of people in there that I really didn't know, and most of my furniture was gone. And I thought to myself right off the bat, this is probably not going to be a good evening. And so everybody insisted that I go to AA, and I quit drinking and so on and so forth. And there were 2 guys across the street that were going to AA, so I went to AA with them. And it was one of those much more traditional, and it was a men's group. I really did not like it at all. It was one of those meetings that if somebody had forced me to go to the meeting consistently, I would have gone back to drinking. Okay. But for me, the fear of losing my wife and my kids was instrumental in my stopping drinking. Okay. I also have to admit one of the easy things about quitting drinking for me was, once again, I didn't have a lot of problems with anxiety. I didn't have a lot of depression. I just physically loved the feeling of alcohol within me. And I think that made it a lot easier for me to quit than for some other people. And I've been off for 33 years now. The only alcohol that I've had in that time was when I went up to my daughter's college. Lynn and I went up for one of her presentations she sang. And then they had communion at church, and I don't ever take communion because I'm not a church guy. And they said, oh, come on, take communion, take communion. So I went up, and sure enough, I took communion and popped what I thought was going to be grape juice, and it was wine. And I was really, really pissed. You know, it was like, if this starts me drinking again, I am really going to be mad. Okay. But, I think, like I say, for me, quitting alcohol was, I think, a lot easier than quitting smoking. And I'm not sure why. I guess the determination of not losing Wesley and Lauren and Lynn, it was just something that I wasn't going to do. What has been really hard for me is watching my son as he goes through all the trials and tribulations that he went through that were involved in alcohol and drugs. And the reason that I say it really bothered me was simply, with my alcoholism, I was in total control of whether I did it or whether I didn't. With my son, I knew that he had issues that needed to be solved, but I also knew that you cannot come up with a solution and give them the solution. They have to get to the point where they want the solution on their own. So I will admit that I helped him acquire drugs and alcohol. simply because I was waiting to get to the point where he reached rock bottom. Because until you reach rock bottom, many times you're not going to find a solution. And how many times have you heard about people that go to a detox and, they're really either not that bad off or they haven't made the decision that they're going to straighten out their lives. And so they go right back to it again. And I knew that by the time he hit rock bottom and he had decided that he wanted to go to detox, I thought, this is going to work. And I've got to admit, too, that without this particular group, I don't know that he ever would have been able to maintain the sobriety that he is going through right now. He found the group online, and he asked me to come with him. And I hadn't been to AA since the first 3 meetings that I went to that I absolutely hated. And the first time I came to the group, I thought, this is exceptional. The style, the very nature, the communication of all the people. Everybody talks from the heart and from the soul. You don't have cliches. Not that a cliche doesn't show up now and again. It does. But it's usually hooked to something of deep emotional content. And when you sit in these meetings and listen to the people talk, that's what helps to guide you through whatever you're going through. And I can't say enough about this group, about AA, the 12 steps. Secular AA to me is just absolutely incredible. The other, let's say more traditional, more religious groups, I wouldn't have ever been able to go with that. So I'm going to kind of end with what I consider to be an interesting little story. And it's a story about a Bible, okay? And it's not, to me, it's not a religious story. It's a story about a Bible. World War II, my dad and his 2 brothers were all involved in World War II. My dad was Army Air Corps. I had an uncle that was a CB, and he went in on Guadalcanal. And I had another uncle who was a merchant marine. Well, when my Uncle Frank went into the Merchant Marines, he was given a Bible. It was a little pocket Bible with a zipper and a little leather cover. It was given to him by a Parson Ringsmith up in Massachusetts. And he was ferrying troops over for the Normandy invasion when his ship was torpedoed and the ship went down. A lot of the soldiers down below didn't make it out, but in the chaos that went on, he lost the Bible and a soldier picked it up. And the soldier went on to go into Normandy and throughout the entire European campaign. At the end of the war, he gave the Bible to his mother. His mother did some research and found who Parson Ringsmith was and managed to get the Bible back to my uncle. My uncle then gave it to his younger brother, Butch, who carried it through Korea with him. 1968, they gave it to me, and I took it to Vietnam with me. In fact, it was in my pants pocket when I was thrown overboard. When I came back, I gave him the Bible back, and he gave it to his son, who took it to Iraq. And I don't think of it as religious. I just think of it as a remarkable little book that I hope nobody ever has to take again. And in November of 2015, you remember I told you about a daughter that I never saw? I met her. And we have gotten to be very, very good friends. So with that, I'll quit.
Great.
All right. Thank you, Jack. I won't say anything now. I'll start here with you, Richard, though, and we'll pass around the microphone and add whatever you'd like.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Richard. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Richard.
That's a great story about your daughter, Jack. You and I talked about that a while ago, and just amazing. We talked about spirituality this morning and what it means or doesn't mean to many of us, but just little things like that, I think, confirm that there's karma out there. Whether that's spirituality or something spiritual, to each his own, but there's definitely karma out there. So I think back on my drinking. I came from a family where we all drank, and everybody I knew drank. I didn't know anybody who didn't drink until I got out of college. I just that's all everybody did. You didn't plan to do anything on Friday night but go out drinking. So it was like, where are you going to go out drinking? Who's going to get the beer? Who's having a party? It was always that, and that was that way from 16 to, for me, through about 23 or 24 after college, and then a lot of wasted years in the 20s, just kind of chasing more fun. And I guess I should have probably died several times during that decade, and I drank so much more then than I have had to drink and was drinking at the time that I quit, which I think is why it made it so hard for me to think about acknowledging that I was an alcoholic, because I was, fairly successful at work, and I didn't feel like I was, being such an asshole that that the drinking was the reason that I sometimes could become a little bit of an asshole. But I was. I think it was pretty clear that I was, just in my conversations with my wife since. But it was just weird because I drank so much in my 20s and early 30s that I'm lucky to be here. And anyway, when I quit, it was just it was really just more. Felt like it was more like breaking a habit, not an addiction, but breaking a habit. But it was becoming all encompassing in my mind. I thought about it all the time, and I kind of knew one of these days I'm going to have to do this, or am I going to be able to get away with it? And then I think to myself, do I really want to think like this the rest of my life? Be wondering about my marriage and my friendships and my time when I'm drinking alone, and if that's healthy or not healthy, and it's taken a while just to kind of come to grips with it and accept that something was bothering me, and I knew it for years, and I just couldn't make myself take that leap. And so thankfully I didn't end up in jail. I didn't have another DUI. I'd had a couple in the past. I didn't hit rock bottom. And I called one of my best friends, who I knew was a recovering alcoholic, and she said, "Have you hit rock bottom?" I said, "No, not really." But I knew I needed to do something, and I was so grateful when I came to this meeting, the Saturday meeting, that first time, because it just felt like there was something spiritual in that room, and I loved the different people, the different backgrounds of the people in the room, and the different stories and their perspectives on why they drank and their alcoholism. It was really meaningful to me. But I still kind of tried to backtrack on it for a while. But each time I did, it was always, I always knew that I didn't feel good about it. I felt better being around people who didn't drink, and slowly but surely the habit has kind of left me. And I had a really good day today, and my daughter and a new friend, we went out to lunch and listened to them talk about their lives, and then came home and spent some time with my wife. And I could tell things were feeling differently, where it was feeling more comfortable, and that I'm more used to not feeling like I'm bored, I want to go drink, that this is, not every day is supposed to be full of stimulation, that some days are just days that you're, whiling away at whatever, waiting for something to happen or make it happen. And, so anyway, I don't have anything really more to say, but just thinking about that in your daughter and meeting her again after all those years, and you didn't share that she found you through a friend that you knew from Vietnam, and then through the art world or something like that in Seattle and music. It's, it couldn't have happened without some spiritual purpose behind it, So congratulations, and I'm so glad that y'all are friends.
She found one of 8 people that I had been in Vietnam with, who was a very good friend, and she was told that I worked for Hallmark, and that's how she zeroed in on how to find me. And I thought, 8 people out of the whole United States, what are the odds? So,
pretty small or pretty big.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that she was able to find Keith and that he was able to tell her. It's been marvelous, really has.
I'll pass.
Thanks, Richard.
My name is Chris, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Chris.
Well, first of all, I really enjoyed your talk. Boy, there's a lot to think about. A couple of things I just want to touch on. Number one, I think one of the reasons why I really like this group, not just the secular part, is because, there's a couple of people like you and Wes, and there's another group of fathers and sons. So when I found this group, my father was dying basically, and he died last week. And I also know that although he didn't go into treatment until maybe like 5 years ago, that he was a heavy drinker. He was an alcoholic, sought treatment in the early stages of his Alzheimer's. And, it was probably a little too late for him to really enjoy life in a sober way. He did quit for 3 or 4 years, which was great. But at the same time, I realized that I don't want that to be me. I don't want to live my life. I'm 57 now. I just turned 57 last week. I don't want to spend the rest of my life drinking into oblivion. He didn't. He was always functional, but he wasn't happy. And I know that. And I know that one of the most difficult times I had was it was a little over a year ago. There was a family argument that I got in the middle of between my sister and I, and it was in a public place. And I threw a few F-bombs and a few B words at her, and it was just really nasty. And there was drinking involved, and there was a trigger. And I remember my dad, in later Alzheimer's, that evening just gave me a big hug and said, I love you, and I'm so sorry about all this. Why are you? And then he started to cry that night, and the next day I came over to apologize, and my sister was crying. We all were crying, but my dad just felt so bad about everything that was going on, although he couldn't completely comprehend. He just couldn't understand why we were having this argument, because I had been taking such good care of him, between he and his wife, my mother. And so the last couple of months, it's really, for me, it's been very important for me to be present and to be sober. And I am so glad that I found an AA group that I really enjoy, and I get a lot out of it. But a lot of it is because everybody's open and frank about their family relationships, and a lot of the family relationships are intact. You go to other AA groups and they're not intact. And family has always been important to me, and we all have our own issues, light sides and dark sides, if you will. And I think if you're willing to confront sort of the more dark side, you can really appreciate the light side. Because it's not, I'm a very gray person. I'm not black and white at all. Anyway, I want to just say thank you, and thanks to this group, because it's been very, very helpful to me. And a lot of it's in large part because of the family part of it. And you're a part of that too. So with that, I'll pass.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
I'm Douglas, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Douglas.
You've talked about in the beginning when you were serving that you were put in charge of talking to the group, like to your squad or whatever it was. I don't know the technical name for it. And you never wondered why. And after you talking tonight, and after being around for the last 2 years and hearing you talk in meetings, you very gracefully demand attention, and you don't try. It just is. When you open your mouth, it reminds me of like the History Channel narrator. It's just, I zone in on it, and I have to listen to whatever you're saying. And I love that. I appreciate your story, and I appreciate you being in my life, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Douglas.
Good evening. I'm Jim. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jim.
I'm new to the program, and I've gone to a couple of the groups, and I found this online, and the time worked. So I wanted to check it out. I have done some damage to my family, and my wife is angry, and I hope that being part of the AA and trying to figure out why my triggers did what they did, and my particular weakness with alcohol can be addressed. But right now it's pretty ugly, and my wife wants a trial separation, and it's really, really stressful. I'm not prepared for this. So I really need the companionship and the acceptance that you find at AA meetings, where people listen, they understand, they don't judge. It's been very eye-opening. So with that, I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm John. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, John.
Boy, I don't know what to say, but thank you very much for sharing your story. I love these meetings, and I hope you come back, because I think that absolutely just connecting with other people who support you and your desire to stay sober and get your life together. I mean, that's really what matters, and that's what did it for me, and that's what I think it does for the rest of us. So there's all kinds of meetings all over the city. Absolutely. So a lot of secular ones too, by the way.
I'm Kana, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Kana.
I just want to thank you for sharing your story. People who haven't been to our group don't know how much of a figure you are, and how you embrace people when they first start going. And you really kind of are very helpful and kind to people, and I appreciate that. So with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Kana.
I'm Marty, alcoholic.
Hi, Marty.
And I couldn't have said it better than you did, so thanks. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Jack. Did you want to tack on any extra tidbits?
No, just the inspiration of this group and the Monday, Wednesday group has been eye-opening for me. I quit drinking on my own, didn't much think about it, just did it, okay? Having come to the meetings, I've realized how difficult it is for so many people, and how many issues that they face on a daily basis. I was one of the lucky ones. I just stopped. I didn't DT. I didn't go to any kind of detox. I just stopped. My wife and kids hadn't been gone, I don't know how I would have stayed off alcohol. But by myself, I was able to deal with it. But this group and the other group have given me so much to think about. It's remarkable. And I love it when we have new people that come in and they keep coming back. Douglas was one I can remember the first night he ever came. And he's had his ups, he's had his downs, but he always comes back. And we're always happy to have him back. So, good luck to everyone.
Thank you, Jack. I liked how you opened it. We talk about a lot of things that come out of Bill's book, 12 Secular Steps now. But I think for the most part, everything here is extremely practical for getting through problems in one's life and learning about what causes them. I appreciate everybody's input. Did anybody else have anything else they wanted to add? All right. I guess that's a wrap. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.